In this video, you're going to see a sped up version of how I made this sexy cartoon lady. So let's hit play and see how it went. So I always start with a sketch on a piece of paper first, just because unless you have a Cintiq, it's very hard to actually do a great sketch with a tablet because, you know, your cursor's moving up there and your hand's moving down there. Very hard for your brain to figure out. So it's much easier to sketch on paper first and just take a photo on your iPhone and then, just import it into Photoshop. And then this step here is I'm just cleaning up some of the, anatomical errors, or maybe trying to improve some of the gesture, because I've had that problem before where I just jump straight to the coloring stage and then some things can go wrong. So it's best to try and get all of the anatomy and everything figured out now, because it becomes more problematic later to try and fix it. So I'm just fixing a few tiny little things, and then we get into the coloring in just a jiffy. Right about now, there we go. So the coloring in is really every object in it. So the jeans, the shirt, the hair, the skin needs to be on a separate layer, and you just want to do a solid color, no shading, just completely solid. And it's coloring in. You know how it is. Keep within inside the lines, play safe, and you should come out with something that looks semi-okay. Now the outline there, by the way, I'm not actually using that in the final render. That's just for my reference. Doing a little bit of detail on the jeans, the eyes. The eyes are, you should spend a lot longer on them than normal, because they are the window to the soul. Now, this stage here, this is a really cool method I learned from Johannes Helgeson, who has a great video here. If you want to watch it, explains it in more detail. But basically, you add an adjustment layer above everything else on your scene, and then you set that adjustment layer to be like a really dark value. And then you use that mask to basically paint over the top of the entire scene. And because you have painted all the coloring in on its own separate layer, you can just, hold down Control and then click select on that layer. And then it will, only allow you to paint with inside that. So that's how you can get those clean lines of shadow on top of everything you've done. It helps. I mean, I've got a 3D artist background. That's where I'm really from. I'm not 2D art proficient at all. In fact, this was only 6 months of learning that I've sort of picked this up, and I decided to pass it on to you guys. But look at some boobies online. I wanted to get some reference photo of how shadows look underneath the breasts, so I decided to do a bit of Googling. I can't remember what I was talking about. On that note, though, this style is really copying the style of Julio Caesar, who is a cool artist on ArtStation I found. And so what it helps you, like if you've got a style or inspiration, don't just hide it in a folder somewhere. You want to have it on a separate screen, preferably. If you've got two monitors, have it up there so that you can reference it at all times. This is something that I learned at a Gnomon workshop recently, and I've just started implementing it, and it's really helpful. Because otherwise you just hide it in a folder and you never really see it. You just want to have it open at all times. A lot of this is just trial and error, by the way. And I suspect that no matter what artist you think has it all together, like I look at and idolize some artists online, but I bet they go through the same trial and error as anybody. It's just a matter of like zooming out, seeing what looks wrong. Like, oh, that arm looks a little bit weird. The shorts look a little bit, strapped together down there. Maybe just fix them a bit. And it's just a matter of just going through each thing, trying to improve upon it, look at references online, and get feedback as much as you can. Doesn't matter how many friends you've got. I mean, everybody's got like 3 people they could probably ask for feedback, even if it's just on Facebook or Twitter. I like to use Twitter. But whoever you've got, just bring them in and go, hey, what do you think of this? And even if they're not proficient in art, you can just say what looks wrong, what looks odd to you, and they'll be able to tell you what looks strange straight away. So there you go. So this part here, you can see, I mean, I think I redrew these lips like 20 or 30 times, trying different expressions. Like I had Google up on the next screen, just looking at faces. I thought like, oh, maybe this sort of face would look good. Just trying a whole bunch of things. That part there where I put them side by side, I posted up the comparison on Twitter, and I got a whole bunch of feedback online. And then this is day 2. So I've come in the next day. Really helps, by the way, if you don't have a deadline, give it a day. Like come back to it the next day, the day after that preferably, and you'll always notice something the next day that looks wrong. So here, somebody on Twitter pointed out that the pose looked really weird. like it's totally off balance before that. It looked like she was about to fall over, which, that sort of body probably happens quite a lot. But it looks really odd in that sort of pose. So here I originally started to sketch it, and then I'm like, nah, it's too much work. I'm going to try liquefy. So this is the liquefy, which is sort of like a cheating way in Photoshop to try and fix problems with it. And so I did that, and then I'm like, all right, so I got to resketch this. I got to tilt the head to the right a little bit. I got to redo all the shadows under here. This is why getting the anatomy and gesture right at the start is really helpful, really important if you're smart and you've done it ahead of time. Yeah, so now I'm trying to go over the top of this, the liquefy work that I've just done and redo all of the shadows, and you can see I'm struggling. Like, it's looking weird. I'm comparing it to the other one, and it's just looking really odd. It just seems bizarre. There's no life in it, and I'm thinking like, oh, I got to fix the lips, maybe that'll solve it. And then I'm like, no, you know what? I'm actually going to go back to where I was before. So the resketched version. So it's more work because I'm going to have to redo all of the shadows on everything, but I think it's going to come out with a cleaner pose. So I'm just following down that track, and eventually it did turn out fine. So if you're worried that your method that you're following is like, you're not sure, you feel like you're sort of playing around, you're experimenting a lot, I think that's part of being an artist. It's really what it is. In fact, if you're not playing around, you're not experimenting, I feel like you're sort of growing stagnant. You're not really learning. So if you're playing around, that's a good thing. So here I tried a whole bunch of different facial expressions, move the eyebrows up a little bit. Expressions are really hard to get right, and that's something that I've learned the hard way. It creates really interesting work if you can get a nice expression on the face. It just looks more interesting to the viewer, but it is quite hard to pull off, especially in this cartoony style. I think it can be hard to get that. So here I sort of took a break, go get a coffee every now and then, come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes. That really helps. Redrawing the lips again for the 50th time maybe. Really grinds you down after a while. So yeah, this part here I realized like, if you move the eyes, like, it actually looks kind of interesting, like looking off to the right there, not looking directly at the camera. So I used the reference photo there, you can see obviously, but that was just more sort of a pose light sort of reference, but you can play around with it. Like you can see I added in some underwear there. Like that's just something I thought made it look even sexier. I don't care, like sexiness. Why not? I always thought it was like wrong. Like, all these people doing sexy drawings. Why? It's because it's kind of fun. We're human. Why not have a laugh every now and then? Anyway, so here I was doing some textured brushwork because otherwise it just sort of looks like cut line, like really harsh shadows. So I wanted to sort of soften it a bit, and that's basically copying again Julio Caesar's style. And by the way, if anybody thinks there's anything wrong with copying, take a look at the book. Oh, bugger, what's that book called? To Steal Like an Artist. Great book, goes over everything about why you have to be stealing. So, yeah, it's good, especially as you're starting out, to copy styles of others. So I just have it on the screen there. I'm looking at how he's done his shadows, where to put detail, when not to put detail. With cartoony styles, it's very important. At this point, I realized, like, if I add an adjustment layer above the hair, I can change the color and make it something funky, and it kind of suits the style a lot more than just having blonde hair. And that's where it really started to look cool to me. I brought in my wife. I asked her for her opinion. She's like, ew, slutty. No, she thought the colors actually looked really nice. But here we go, just basically doing some final touches in here. Do a little bit of detail, thought I'd add in a belly button piercing. And there you go. So that concludes the time lapse. That time lapse, by the way, if you're curious, it was about 8 hours in total. It took from start to finish, probably more closer to 9 towards the end. But yeah, it's a long process. But at the start, you don't know that. You're just sort of playing around with it. You're having fun with it. And sometimes your artwork, like, it'll be really short. Maybe you'll only do it in 3 hours. Maybe it'll only take 2. I don't know if you get really good at it. Every time it just gets easier. But it just I find that last little bit is where you often spend a lot of your time, like fixing little things, just trying to get it to look just right. Like usually about 2 hours in, like the style and the look of it's pretty well solid. It's just then that last, 6 hours to really fix errors and really take it to that next bit, which is really going to give it that nice impact. adding in your colors and brush strokes and things like that. Anyways, just to reiterate, I am not a 2D artist. I'm not a pro at anything at all. Just some people on Twitter wanted a tutorial, which I'm not going to do because I think that'd be a really boring tutorial. But I just thought I'd post this little time-lapse video for anybody that wanted to learn. But I highly recommend checking out Johannes Helgeson's videos and check out Julio Caesar's work as well. Those guys are pros. Those guys know what they're doing. Anyways, that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Bye.